This is Assessment 4 presentation for Theories and Methods for Honours Research, Semester 1, 2018. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Yuwi people of Mackay, Queensland, and the Whadjuk of Perth, Western Australia. I pay my respects to elders past, present and upcoming. Hello, my name is Ashley and I'm presenting to you my honours project for 2018 titled It's a Mad World, Globalisation and Cyber Terrorism in the 21st Century. I will walk you through the main aspects of my project in this presentation, and that includes the research question, my theoretical frameworks and background, the two major concepts, which is globalisation and cyber terrorism, my hypothesis and central research argument, the plan in which I proceed to undertake the research, and concluding with my all-over objectives. My point of departure is the quote from Mallory in 1943 saying, "When goods do not cross borders, soldiers will." That will be fairly thematic throughout my project and a good starting point for this knowledge creation. I'll be sharing with you my central research question, which is how has the globalisation process contributed to the rise of cyber terrorism in the early 21st century? So while it's quite specific, I'm looking at two very large concepts, which is globalisation and cyber terrorism. So to define both, I say globalisation is the transfer internationally of people, goods, values, cultures and ideas. And cyber terrorism is the use of information and communications technology by terrorist and extremist groups to not only execute violence, but also to further their political agendas. I provide a theoretical framework that assists in explaining the world as we know it in epistemological terms. That is, the 21st century is characterised by postmodernist and post-structuralist worldviews that argue mass media saturation, late-stage capitalism and post-industrial conditions, and notions of subjective reality whereby individuals have greater power to create their own truth and narrative of the world around them. This framing supports my project's underlying themes of exploring how individuals, communities and institutions are using communications technology in the postmodern era. It is necessary to analyse both the advantages of the information age and also the dangers of blurring the line between the kinetic and non-kinetic spheres. Globalisation is present in most aspects of life in the global north. However, I will specifically focus on its reciprocal relationship with technology developments since the end of the Second World War. I devote part of my thesis to a historiographical analysis of the relationship, but without technology, globalisation wouldn't be as arguably successful as it is. And without globalisation, advancements in technology would not have been as rapid as we are witnessing today. Technology has facilitated a number of industries to expand onto the global stage through mediums such as the internet. However, in a capitalist society, preventative security has typically not been a huge priority for large private organisations. This is particularly concerning when we consider that much of a nation-state's civilian critical infrastructure is owned and managed by private stakeholders. Terrorism is intrinsically linked to ideological separatism and can be described as the use of ICT to further these agendas globally. Cyber terrorism refers to not just the execution of violent acts waged in the non-kinetic sphere, but also covers other activities that these terrorists and extremist groups may engage in to further their political agendas. For example, acts of cyber terrorism include the spreading of propaganda material throughout networks for the purpose of recruiting new members. While propaganda is not a new concept, the concerning aspect in the 21st century era is the reach that it now has thanks to the globalisation process that enables technology developments and results in increased community building capacities. How can the threat be mitigated when they employ the same instruments that state actors and private companies use to facilitate economic growth and interdependence? That does lead me back to my point of departure from Mallory in 1943. Now, some 75 years later, one could argue that the goods are still crossing the borders, but now so too are the armies. And if we remove the conditions that are enabling cyber terrorism to flourish, we remove the conditions that are allowing these goods to cross borders. My central hypothesis then is, so long as nation states of the global north support liberal socio-economic interdependence and prioritise capitalism, they are providing the conditions that allow the cyber terrorism threat to manifest regardless of territorial limitations. In my research process, I need to be both interpretive and critical. I utilise different research methods including historical research, instrumental case studies, state policy analysis and social network analysis. Combined with my identified methodologies and consideration of my own position and habitus, I expect to present a strong case of both concepts of this project. I anticipate that this project will be primarily qualitative, with quantitative data collection supporting any claims I make in relation to the strength of interdependence due to economic globalisation. Policy analysis will give insight into how nation states are addressing the cyber terrorism threat, and case studies will investigate known terrorist groups who utilise ICT instruments to further their agendas and whether they are successful in achieving their objectives using this method. To conclude, the objective of my research is to identify the common conditions that allow global economic interdependence and enable cyber terrorism. I predict that it is due to the influence of the globalisation process that is deteriorating traditional territorial borders and also enabling the global integration of ideological and cultural values in the postmodern era. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and if you have any feedback or questions, please let me know.